When you hear the word Gothic, what do you think of? Cathedrals and gargoyles? Edgy music? Fashion from Hot Topic? Vampires of the sparkly or murderous variety? From the late 90s through the mid-2000s, Gothic anime was thriving. Berserk, Trinity Blood, Ergo Proxy, Hellsing Ultimate, Death Note, Black Butler, Soul Eater, Pandora Hearts, Gothic. If anime has taught me anything, it's that there is nothing better than taking two different, separate things and fusing them together to create one new, better thing.
Word.
And that's exactly what Gothic anime does. By stitching together European and Asian Gothic horror, anime adds an irresistibly thrilling new essence to the Gothic genre. So join me, if you dare, as I return to the roots of the Gothic genre in both Europe and Japan, and take a closer look at some of the most unnerving, grotesque, and spine-chilling stories that Gothic anime has to offer. Like many Gothic stories, this video includes content which some may find disturbing. It also includes major spoilers for the following anime. Part 1. The Queen's Gothic. Once upon a time in 1764, an English earl named Horace Walpole wrote a book called The Castle of Otranto. The story checked all the boxes of the Gothic aesthetic: a creepy castle, gruesome death, skeletons and ghosts, romance and religion, and, of course, just a spot of depravity. Horace's novel was so dark and twisted that critics called it repulsive, disturbing, immoral even. So, naturally, the book became a bestseller. Weird. That kind of reminds me of another book. The Castle of Otranto is credited with jump-starting the Gothic literary genre in England, which exploded into popularity thanks to some other famous writers like these guys, and Penny Dreadfuls, which were basically cheap, trashy magazines which published pulpy fiction about serial killers and vampires. European Gothic and the tropes it established have since inspired many popular anime. They're typically period pieces set in Europe. For example, Berserk is set in Midland, a fictional version of medieval Europe, Black Butler is set in Victorian England, and Gothic, D. Greyman, and Pandora Hearts are set in alternate fictional versions of 19th century Europe. Along with a European setting comes European cultural context. Western Gothic anime draws inspiration from European history, religion, literature, and mythology. For example, take Trinity Blood, which strives to answer the age-old question, what if we crammed vampires, nuns, and shotguns all into one show? Hallelujah. Trinity Blood is set in a post-apocalyptic future where vampires and humanity are at war. The last remaining government is literally just the Vatican. The main characters include a priest, a nun, and the Pope. Simply put, the story wouldn't be what it is if not for Catholicism. Black Butler is filled with references to European history and literature, featuring callbacks to Jack the Ripper, Sherlock Holmes, Alice in Wonderland, and more. Not to mention the name drops. All of Snake's pet snakes are named for famous English authors.
That is a good question, Webster. Yes, I'd noticed the same, Wordsworth. Yes, it is, Keats, I agree. And an excellent idea that was wild.
Setting, religion, and cultural references do help make an anime feel like a Western Gothic, but there are some other fundamental pieces of the puzzle that truly define the genre. Instead of just listing them off, I'll give you an example. Let's take a closer look at an anime which exemplifies the Western Gothic genre, Vampire Knight. Vampire Knight is a 2008 anime based on the manga created by Matsuri Hino. The time period and setting are vaguely reminiscent of either modern-day Europe or maybe Japan. It's hard to tell, but the majority of the story takes place in one isolated location.
This is Cross Academy, a famous private school where all the students live on campus and the dorms.
Unknown to the human students who attend class during the day, the night class is made up entirely of vampires. Our heroine, Yuki Cross, is the headmaster's adopted daughter, so she is well aware of this. In fact, it's her duty as the school's guardian to protect the vampire's secret from the humans, and protect the humans' sweet, sweet blood from the vampires. Because this is both a shoujo anime and a vampire romance, you know they gotta hit us with a love triangle. Well, technically it's not a love triangle so much as a love angle. Yuki is at the center, and on either side of her are Kaname, the elegant, mysterious 10,000-year-old vampire who saved her life when she was a child, and Zero, her moody, broody human childhood friend who's a massive vampire hater. And his grudge isn't just because a vampire is trying to steal his girl. When Zero was young, a vampire killed his entire family, and he's hated them ever since. The plot thickens when it's revealed that Zero is hiding something. Thanks to a vampire bite, he is slowly becoming a monster himself. Unlike Kaname, an immortal pureblood who was born as a vampire, Zero has a much darker fate. Eventually, like all vampires who are made instead of born, he will become a level E vampire, a ravenous monster unable to control his bloodlust. Zero knows what's in store for him and is consumed by self-loathing and anguish due to the knowledge that he will one day become the monster he hates more than anything. If there was some sort of competition to crown the angstiest fictional character of all time, Zero would be a 2-time Olympic gold medalist.
Before I turn into a level E, I want to die and I want you to kill me.
It's not that serious. Trust me, I know that.
Along with your classic high school drama, Yuki, Kaname, and Zero become entangled in a series of personal and political conflicts between humans and vampires. Vampires have a strict social hierarchy, and the night class is rife with manipulation and power struggles, as students try to claw their way to the top of the social pecking order. Meanwhile, Zero gets wrapped up in the Vampire Hunter Association, an organization responsible for eliminating rogue vampires to protect humanity. The 3 leads closely resemble character archetypes popular in classic European Gothic literature. Yuki, like most heroines in classic European Gothic fiction, is a damsel in distress. Some famous Gothic damsels in distress include Matilda from the Castle of Otranto, Emily in the Mysteries of Udolpho, and Antonia in The Monk. Yuki has a habit of getting herself wrapped up in dangerous situations, and most of the story's plot involves Zero and Kaname taking turns to rescue her from a series of increasingly dangerous threats.
The person you've chosen to hurt is someone very dear to me.
Yuki's personality is also pretty consistent with your typical kind-hearted, virtuous maiden. She's naive, gentle, and self-sacrificing, constantly putting herself in danger for the sake of others. Kaname is a textbook Byronic hero. Byronic heroes are named after Lord Byron, an English writer who used this type of character often in his work. A lot of classic European Gothic heroes are Byronic, like Heathcliff from Wuthering Heights and Rochester from Jane Eyre. Characters fitting this archetype are attractive, intelligent, sophisticated, and hold a high social standing. They have an irresistible charisma which draws people toward them. On the flip side, they're also arrogant, cynical, and prone to self-destruction. They're frequently described as dark and brooding, and often have secrets or troubled pasts. All of these are true for Kaname. He's student council president, and both vampires and humans alike fawn over him and are constantly vying for his attention and approval. Kaname is typically a cold, stoic person, and he has no problem with lying to or manipulating his fellow students.
Now then, for the 2 who have fainted, I'll have their memory of tonight erased.
Kaname, we should really get going now.
Right. Well then, I will see you at the ball.
Right.
Looks like she doesn't remember anything.
Some things are better forgotten.
Zero, on the other hand, is a classic anti-hero. Anti-heroes and Byronic heroes are similar, but they have a few distinct differences. Unlike Byronic heroes like Kaname, who are suave and sophisticated on the outside but tormented within, anti-heroes are very clearly flawed on the outside.
You all need to get back to your dorms right now! Every day they're out here screaming and throwing themselves.
Why are you acting cocky, you big jerk?
Some Gothic anti-heroes include Mr. Hyde from Jekyll and Hyde and Victor Frankenstein, the doctor, not the monster, from Frankenstein. Zero is abrasive, aggressive, and very much alone. Yuki is his only real friend, and he isn't exactly nice to her most of the time.
What is this? Medicine?
It's none of your business, okay?
Although Zero does exhibit some heroic characteristics like bravery in the face of danger and capability in battle, he's also overcome with self-hatred and uncertainty. He believes that he's defective and broken, undeserving of happiness. Ultimately, Zera's character arc is more about overcoming his own inner turmoil and conquering his self-hatred than it is about defeating evil vampires or winning Yuki's heart. Anyway, it's pretty obvious that Yuki and Kaname make the better couple. I mean, just look at them. They're perfect for each other.
Do you remember who I am?
You're my... This man, he's my older brother!
Like I was saying, I've always thought that Yuki and Zero should end up together. I mean, opposites attract and all that. They were meant to be.
Nice save!
Victorian-era European Gothic did not shy away from taboo topics. Incest was featured prominently in Gothic classics like The Castle of Otranto, The Witching Hour, and The Monk. So, now that I've made you deeply uncomfortable, let's do a quick recap. Vampire Night is a great example of a European Gothic. First, it's got vampires, an extremely European Gothic trope, not to mention an isolated setting and classic European Gothic character archetypes like the damsel in distress, Byronic hero, and anti-hero. And of course, there's the brother-on-sister action. Western Gothic, and Western fiction in general, is plot-driven, the story propelled by external conflicts. In Vampire Night, there are constantly unfolding subplots and twists. This is true for many other Western Gothic anime like D. Greyman, Soul Eater, and Berserk. The audience is at the edge of our seats as the story unfolds and the action leads up to the climax. You know, looking back on it now, Vampire Night seems less like one of my favorite shoujo romances and more like a nostalgic guilty pleasure, absolutely riddled with red flags.
Part 2. The Emperor's Gothic.
I don't have a background in Japanese literature, and I'm guessing you probably don't either. Or you do, and you're about to leave a super detailed critique in the comments section. Most of what I learned about Japanese Gothic fiction comes from this essay by literature professor Dr. Henry Hughes, along with this book, a collection of analytical essays about Asian Gothic, compiled and edited by Dr. Andrew Hock-soon, a professor specializing in Gothic literature. During what Europeans called the Victorian era, Japan isolated itself from Western influence by banning trade and travel from most Western countries.
Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
I'm sorry, did I say the Fire Nation? I meant America. In 1853, an American commodore named Matthew Perry rolled up with a bunch of warships and demanded that Japan open its borders to trade with the US, or else. Japan obliged, and about a decade later, the Meiji period began. During the Meiji period, Western technology, fashion, food, and the arts were rapidly introduced to Japan. Japan built Western-style railways, started a new Western-inspired education system, and slowly but surely, even the Japanese government was restructured to be more Western. Suddenly, Western ideas were considered modern and sophisticated. However, this radical Westernization led to fears about losing Japanese tradition. How could Japan adopt Western ideas without erasing the nation's history and identity? This anxiety was a recurring theme in Gothic Japanese literature published during and after the Meiji period, and is reflected in stories like The Holy Man of Mount Koya by Kyoka Izumi or Terror by Junichiro Tanizaki. These tales and more evoked a certain Western Gothic style and language, but without totally deviating from traditional Japanese writing techniques or folklore. So, what does Asian Gothic anime look like? For one, it's typically set in Japan, either in the modern day or the future. Witch Hunter Robin, Higurashi, and XX Holic are set in modern Japan, and Ergo Proxy is set in Ramdo, a dystopian futuristic city with a government similar to Japan's. Asian mythology, religion, and folklore also play a prominent role in Asian Gothic anime. Take, for example, Higurashi, which is set in a Japanese village in the 1980s. One of the main characters, Rika, works as a shrine maiden, and her family has a long history of serving the village as priests or shrine maidens to the local deity, Oyashiro. Things go awry after the village has an annual festival in Oyashiro's honor. Local deities, shrines, and shrine maidens originate from the Japanese religion Shinto. Just like Trinity blood couldn't exist without Catholicism, Higurashi wouldn't exist if not for Shinto. Two of my favorite anime which exemplify Asian Gothic are Shiki and Another. Both are based on horror novels written by Japanese authors. Shiki was written by Fuyumi Ono, and Another was written by Yukito Ayatsuji. Here's a fun fact. These two authors are actually married to each other in real life. Both Shiki and Another take place in small, rural Japanese villages and are set in the modern day. They are character-driven rather than plot-driven, with a great deal of time spent on exposition, establishing relationships between characters, and slowly building tension. Shiki is set in 1994 in the small village of Sotoba. The story begins when the mysterious Kirishiki family moves into an abandoned European-style castle overlooking the town. Shortly after their arrival, a mysterious illness begins to spread throughout the village, infecting and killing the townspeople one by one. From the audience's perspective, the Kirishiki family are walking red flags.
We're the Kirishikis. We just moved in nearby. You know, the house up on the hill?
The epidemic begins right after they move in. They look like a cross between Sephiroth and the Addams family, and if that isn't enough, we are explicitly told that the mother and daughter are deathly allergic to sunlight. They might as well come right out and say that they're vampires. Well, not exactly vampires. In this story, they're called corpse demons, or shiki. To call shiki a slow burn would be an understatement. The first 2/3 of its runtime are spent introducing the villagers and their day-to-day lives and developing the three main characters: the town's doctor, Toshio, a monk at the local temple, Seishin, and an angsty teenage boy, Natsuno. Our three protagonists respond to the shiki's presence quite differently. The kind, empathetic Dr. Toshio is driven to the edge of insanity as he realizes that the shiki are killing off the townspeople one by one. He reaches a mental breaking point when his wife becomes one of them. The doctor determines that her transformation is the perfect opportunity to learn about the shiki's weaknesses, and so he conducts a series of deranged medical experiments on her.
Stop! Anesthesia doesn't work.
Her cries for mercy fall on deaf ears as the doctor mercilessly conducts more and more lethal tests on her. Dr. Toshio's hatred for the shiki utterly consumes him. He can only see them as monsters, vermin, which must be eradicated for the sake of humanity.
I can't allow their contamination to spread unchecked, so I'll hunt the shiki. That's my justice.
Meanwhile, Seishin, the gentle monk, has a completely different perspective. He develops a friendship with Tsuneko, the young daughter of the Kirishiki family. Even after realizing what the shiki are, Seishin sympathizes with them. They didn't choose to be this way. They have no choice but to kill humans if they wish to survive. While Dr. Toshio believes that killing shiki is carrying out justice, Seishin believes that it's murder.
Taking a life is never justice. No matter what kind of noble cause you're fighting for, it's still murder. Whether the victim is human or something else.
Natsuno is the first person to learn the truth about the shiki, but nobody believes him. As the story unfolds, he himself was transformed into a shiki against his will, but he rejects their way of life.
You haven't been feeding, have you? Accept what you've become. Join us, or our next visit won't be so cordial.
He joins Toshio in a fight against the shiki, intending to exterminate all of them.
You should know I intend to annihilate all the shiki. I'm not going to bother with a negotiation.
We'll kill every single one of them. And that includes me as well.
The building terror and paranoia in the village rises to a sudden and shocking boiling point in the third act of the show, when Toshio instigates an all-out massacre of the shiki. A mob of villagers, overcome with hysteria and rage, ruthlessly slaughter the shiki, who can barely even resist. It's a bloodbath. The violence is made all the more disturbing by the fact that we have come to sympathize with people on both sides of the conflict. The shiki, many of whom were once normal villagers themselves, who were turned against their will, and the humans, who have gone from friendly neighbors to heartless executioners. By the end of the finale, the once peaceful village of Sotoba is burning to the ground. The fact that the story is told through the vantage point of three protagonists, each with their own perspective on the tragedy, requires the audience to consider the conflict from multiple angles. We have the opportunity to see the situation from all sides, so we can sympathize with everyone. Shiki forces us to consider a deeply uncomfortable question. When is killing someone justified? Neither monster nor man were entirely evil. Both Shiki and the humans killed each other out of self-preservation rather than inherent malice. So, how do early European and early Asian Gothic compare? Both are influenced by history, religion, and superstition, and examine topics like death, and they also raise interesting questions about morality. However, there are a number of differences which stand out. Asian fiction, and therefore Asian Gothic, tends to be more character-driven or focused on internal conflict, placing greater emphasis on character development and personal growth than plot progression. As a result, Asian Gothics feel more introspective and cerebral. Shiki's storytelling is almost painfully slow, but its tortoise's pace leaves room for us to really get to know each character. Dr. Toshio's transformation from earnest doctor to raging mad scientist can't happen in a single episode. In order for us to feel that his descent into madness is genuine, we have to bear witness to the change, one agonizing step at a time. One of the major differences between European and Asian Gothic is the framing of morality. Thanks to Christianity's dominance in Europe, the primary conflict in European Gothic fiction was often portrayed as a battle between the forces of good and evil, like the rivalry between God and Satan. But Asian Gothics aren't quite so black and white. In Eastern religions like Buddhism, Taoism, and Shinto, good and evil are not considered to be two opposing principles, with one always triumphing over the other. Instead, they're forces which coexist in balance. Ghosts, demons, or other creatures of horror that often appear in Japanese Gothics are dangerous and misunderstood, but not necessarily evil by nature. In Shiki, none of the characters can be said to be purely good or purely evil. Both the Shiki and the humans are presented as capable of kindness and compassion, and cruelty and violence. The story is built on a foundation of moral ambiguity. And, like many other Asian Gothic works, it's also a tragedy. There is no grand, exciting victory, no feeling of success or triumph.
After all that, the village is still gonna die. I guess I lost now, didn't I?
Is that it? Wins and losses? This isn't a game.
In the end, it may have just been a pointless struggle.
But, on the bright side, at least there was no incest this time.
Part 3. Hybrid Gothic.
We've covered the basics of both European and Asian Gothic, but we're not done yet. What if the two were stitched together to create a sort of Gothic hybrid? And no one knows what it's like to be a hybrid better than Kaneki Ken, the protagonist of Tokyo Ghoul. Tokyo Ghoul, based on the manga by Sui Ishida, combines the fast-paced action of a European Gothic story with the character development, introspection, and moral ambiguity of an Asian Gothic story. The setting imagines a world where humans live alongside ghouls. Ghouls appear human and can live among people undetected, but they must eat human flesh to survive. Humanity's last line of defense is the CCG, or the Commission of Counter-Ghoul, a government-backed military organization responsible for hunting down and eradicating ghouls. The story follows Kaneki Ken, a shy and quiet college student who often reads as a hobby. He gets catfished by Rise, a beautiful ghoul who asks him on a date. Of course, she has the ulterior motive of making Kaneki her dinner. But thanks to a freak accident, the pair of them are crushed by enormous steel beams before she can chow down on him. Rise is left brain dead by the incident, and doctors, unaware that she's a ghoul, save Kaneki's life by transplanting her organs into his body. As a result, he becomes a hybrid half-human, half-ghoul. Thanks to this newfound dual citizenship, Kaneki gets a glimpse of what life is like for both a human and a ghoul. You get the best of both worlds. Initially, Kaneki is horrified by what he has become. He finds ghouls monstrous and terrifying.
You're a monster! I'm not like you!
But he's also forced to rely on them to survive.
A half-breed like you isn't gonna last 5 seconds out here.
Please come with me, young man.
Are you gonna take him in?
Of course I am. It's our policy to help our fellow ghouls in their time of need.
And he soon learns that while some ghouls take pleasure in killing and eating people, many more of them want to lead ordinary lives without harming anyone. In this story, both humans and ghouls play the part of predator and prey. The CCG ruthlessly hunts down ghouls, even those who are too weak to defend themselves. Kaneki sympathizes with those on both sides of the conflict. Throughout the story, Kaneki's humanity and his new ghoulish identity clash. This inner turmoil is not only the result of him becoming half ghoul, it's also due to Kaneki's past and his moral compass. The Kaneki we are first introduced to is a pacifist who doesn't wish to harm anyone. He's constantly under attack from both ghouls and humans, and yet he's reluctant to even fight back. His gentle nature comes from his mother, who died from overwork when he was 10 years old.
Is she leaving you all alone?
She had to go to work.
While he was growing up, his mother told Kaneki,
"It's okay to feel sadness from loss. As long as you remember to stay kind, you'll find joy again."
This ideology that it is better to be harmed than to do harm becomes the foundation of his entire worldview.
It's far better to feel pain yourself than to inflict it on others.
But this philosophy is brought into question when Kaneki is captured and tortured to the breaking point by a ghoul. Under tremendous physical and psychological stress, he is forced to confront the truth. In trying to please others, she failed in her duty as his mother. All she ever did was self-sacrifice for the benefit of others, and it robbed Kaneki of his chance to grow up with a mother. His entire worldview has been wrong all along. Maybe it's better to be the predator than it is to be the prey. After coming to this realization, Kaneki's identity is shattered. His personality changes completely, his pacifism replaced with violence. He embraces a darker, more brutal side of himself. He doesn't hesitate to kill his enemies. The gentle, pacifistic Kaneki Ken we are first introduced to is gone forever. As the first season of Tokyo Ghoul comes to a close, our protagonist is practically unrecognizable. Tokyo Ghoul has a fast-paced, action-packed plotline like that of a Western story, but the narrative is also character-driven, taking the time to world-build, develop Kaneki's personality, and flesh out the relationships between the main cast. Kaneki begins the tale feeling like the male version of a damsel in distress, but by the end of Season 1, he's an anti-hero. There are many references to literature throughout the story. Kaneki's transformation from a normal human into a flesh-eating ghoul parallels Metamorphosis, a famous Gothic short story written by Franz Kafka, a German writer. Metamorphosis is about a man who becomes a grotesque insect creature overnight, and must find a way to cope with this horrific transformation. Kaneki is tortured using a centipede, and after he reaches his mental breaking point, he bears a terrifying resemblance to a centipede. The choice to make Kaneki similar to an insect could be another nod to the Metamorphosis. I think this similarity is intentional. In the manga, Kaneki name-drops Kafka and mentions that he's read his works. There's also a sprinkling of religious symbolism throughout the story. During Kaneki's torture, we watch a field of white carnations turn into red spider lilies. The red spider lily holds symbolic meaning in Buddhism. During the Buddhist holiday Ohigan, it's common practice to plant red spider lilies at graves to pay respect to ancestors. The flower has since grown to symbolize death, misfortune, and farewell in Japan. The moral ambiguity between ghouls and humans is also pretty reminiscent of Asian Gothic. Both humans and ghouls within the story are capable of kindness and killing depending on the context, and neither side is truly good or evil. Kaneki walks the line between righteousness and wickedness, just as he walks the line between human and ghoul. In conclusion, some scholars argue that European Gothic is the only true Gothic literature, but Gothic fiction has no boundaries. It's not exclusive to one time, place, people, or medium. It isn't confined to the pages of books. Anime is such a great way to tell Gothic stories. Animation has the artistic freedom to present the strange and surreal in a way that books and film just can't. Regardless of where we come from or what language we speak, Gothic anime has the power to mystify, horrify, and enthrall us all, with all the irresistible allure of a bloodthirsty vampire.